Welcome to Life Science Leaders, a series of webinars and podcasts for leaders within the life science industry. Throughout the series, I will be interviewing senior leaders across the sector, covering topics that are relevant to what is happening in the industry right now and how that is affecting businesses, the markets, and people. And today I am speaking with Mike Karim, who is CEO of Oxford Endovascular. So Mike, thank you and welcome. And thanks for taking the time to be part of this podcast series.
Oh, you're welcome, Claire. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Great. Now, can you just tell the audience a bit about yourself, please, who you are and what you do?
Yes, certainly. So I'm Mike Karim. I'm the CEO of Oxford Endovascular. Oxford Endovascular is a spin-out from Oxford University. We've been going for nearly 5 years now, and we're developing a cure for brain aneurysms, weaknesses in the brain that can rupture. It's a disease that affects 1 in 50 people, so it's very common. But current technologies are problematic. They have challenges, and we're developing a micro stent that overcomes those challenges. I've worked in medical devices for nearly 30 years now. When I left school, I wanted to be a doctor. I went to med school, did preclinical, but really became interested in innovation and got involved in the pharma industry for about 5 years, and then the medical device industry, which is highly innovative.
Yeah.
I did many roles, worked all around the world, and have worked with smaller and smaller companies ever since, and then helped to found Oxford Endovascular.
So perfect. Thank you, Mike. I guess, obviously, just to let the audience know what the topic is we will be discussing today, and that is the journey of a spin-out and fundraising in the medtech world. Now, that's an interesting topic, Mike, and I know one many of our listeners will be interested in, as a lot of our clients are, in fact, startup companies and spin-outs across all areas of the life science industry. So let me start by asking you, I mean, as you mentioned, after many years of working for companies like Boston Scientific and Hardware Incorporated, etc., what was it that enticed you to join a spin-out from the University of Oxford?
Well, I guess it's one of those evolutions as you go through your career. You're right, say I started in a large company or large companies. I think even when I worked with those large companies, I was very interested in how you get things going, how you make things happen, how you build your own processes. So, for example, in Boston Scientific, it was actually pretty much a startup in Europe. When I joined them, it was a few $1 million, and over the next 12 years became a multi-billion dollar company. Not due to me, but due to people. I really enjoyed my time there. It gave me a lot of training. I built a lot of skill sets. I realized what's involved in building international businesses and taking new technologies to new markets around the world. And that really gave me the thirst for how to do that with smaller and smaller organizations. Since then, I've worked with companies that have just got their CE mark, like Hardware or Lombard Medical, and worked as director of international with those organizations, taken them into markets in Europe, Asia Pacific, and the US. And while I was doing some of that, I did an MBA while I was also working, an executive MBA, which I would encourage anybody to do, but it's no matter how hard you think it is, it's even harder. It's just balancing work-life balance. You give up your social life, but you learn a huge amount. And I think one of the things that I learned was really how to bring teams together. I think build projects, how to look for new markets, how to build a robust business plan, and then put things into action. And that really, I think, encouraged me to look at how to start a company from scratch, basically. So, yeah, excellent. That was a bit of my journey, yeah.
Fantastic. And again, I see, we talk to a lot of companies, and as I mentioned earlier, a lot of them are spin-outs, but it seems to take a really long time to form a new spin-out company out of a university. Why is that, Mike? And I guess, what does the journey look like for anyone that's considering forming a spin-out of their own?
So it's a really good point, and I guess from the outside, it does seem an incredibly long
Mm,
time, and a lot of that depends on the type of technology and so on. And medical devices, medical products, generally, there's 10 to 20 years behind them that people never actually see until it hits the
true.
market. So, in the case of what we've been working on, if you go back to the very beginning, it was two professors, a medic and an engineer, who'd got together. They had this concept of origami engineering for the brain. But of course, you've got to try and fund that. So first of
Yeah.
all, you've got a great idea, but then you've got to get grant funding typically. And our professors managed to get funding from the Wellcome Trust. It was a few £1 million at that stage. And then it's putting that into developing initial prototypes at the bench level. And that in itself can take a few years. You're obviously trying to get a proof of concept. In order to do that, you need to go through very early animal work in the case of an implantable medical device. And all the time, those professors are selling that story internally within the university that actually one day this could be something viable. Now, in my situation, I was approached by the university because I was known in the medical device space for taking companies to market. And really, they asked me the question, look, we've got this, we've worked on it for about 5 years. Is there actually a market for this? And what do you think of it, as a commercial person?
Yeah.
So, then you go through a process of analyzing it, looking at the markets. And if there is a market, you're then defining that, you're then building a business plan in order to, again, support selling that concept to the university that it's viable for spin out. And then, once they agree with that and they think, yeah, okay, we're starting to form a team around this that could do this, you've then got to go out and raise the money. You've got to raise the money. So that, takes you into, well, do you do more grant funding? Do you approach VCs? Who do you approach to actually do this funding? And, if I think back to the process from when I was approached to actually forming the company, it was probably about 2 years. So building the business plan, targeting investors, going through the fundraising process, forming the company legally, officially, and setting all the infrastructure up, and then starting to build a team. So that in itself was a 2-year process before really getting going. So yeah, those are some of the things.
Yeah, that makes sense, of course. And of course, Rome wasn't built overnight, was it? So, and it makes sense that you have to go through those steps and that process to make sure that, as you say, you've got a viable product and there is a product there for commercialization, so to speak. So
that's
I
right.
guess.
Yeah, and there are multiple stakeholders involved. So if you're dealing with a university, particularly a particularly old one like Oxford, there are many stakeholders at different levels, and there's a long history of legal requirements, bureaucracy that one has to work through. Even with all the people who are being very, very supportive, there's just a process to go through to make sure everyone is accounted for.
Yeah, which makes sense. And any company obviously has challenges, but in your opinion and in your experience, obviously of being in this side of things, what do you see as some of the main challenges that spin-out companies do come up against? And I guess, has that changed over the last few months, with the impact of COVID-19?
Well, I guess if I was to pick one big subject as the main challenge, it would be the 3 Fs. So that's fundraising, fundraising, and fundraising. Cash is king, and without cash, you can't really do anything. So, and for me as a CEO, I mean, my team often joke, we get on with all the development and so on, and Mike has to go out and get the money. And sometimes it feels like that, you probably spend 70-80% of your time working on getting the money in. And once you've got it in, you're working on getting the next lot of money in, because it doesn't stop there. So, it's your seed funding. Seed funding is probably a little easier to get if you've got a great idea and a strong team. But then in the case of medical devices, once you've got off the ground and you're you're going through your development phase, before you get to clinicals, before you've proven that it can work in humans, you're in that preclinical phase. And you have to continue to raise money as you go through that. Some people call that the valley of death, because very few companies get through that and can raise the money, particularly in Europe. In the US, it's a lot easier, because you have the venture capital space is a great deal stronger. There are many more investors with deeper pockets. I think in Europe and the UK, I mean, we've been very fortunate. We've got very, very good supportive investors, but then we do work in a very strong ecosystem, and we've been fortunate, but it isn't easy. You have to keep working at it. You have to keep building and hitting your milestones. And of course, in development, there are bumps in the road. You're blazing a trail. You're at the forefront of breaking through boundaries of technology, and things can go wrong. And when they do go wrong, you have to then get over that hurdle. You have to go back to your investors and convince them that it was genuine and there are good reasons for it, and this is what I'm going to go through, and persuade them to continue to support you. So you have to be very persuasive. You have to build your evidence and your credibility with your investors. But then you've also got to look at various other sources of fundraising as well, which again are not easy to get. And we can talk a bit more about that later. But the more you can do things like that, be innovative, look at various sources of funding, the better it is for everybody, your investors, your team, and so on. But building a team is a challenge. Getting the right people, particularly in a small startup, you cannot afford to really have a bad hire. You've got to have a very good process for getting people on board, and not only good people, but they have to be really complementary and really, really work as a team. And it's a cause, taking a startup to commercialization. Everybody has to really believe in the journey. It's got risks. Of course, if you're successful, the rewards are very, very strong. So you've got to find the right kind of people who are up for that challenge. And you mentioned the COVID situation. That's hit the strongest of companies hard. It's hit huge companies like British Airways and the whole airline industry and so on. For startups, it's particularly been challenging. People, some people have found their team who've been ill and haven't been able to work. I know one of our suppliers actually, had someone who was very critically ill because of COVID for about 5 months or so.
Oh, wow.
Through the whole thing. And obviously that's very damaging, obviously, for them and their business, but then obviously with suppliers, and obviously hits the families as well. So from that perspective, continuing to fundraise through that period has been very, very challenging. And I know there have been various government schemes, but for startups, there hasn't been a lot of focus on helping startups. One of the things is that startups will typically have investors who invest through something called the Enterprise Investment Scheme, which was originally set up by the government to incentivize investors to go into early stage companies and support them, give them tax incentives. Unfortunately, the government schemes that have been announced and headlined have actually put off those kinds of investors. So actually worked against that. So it's not something that's hit the headlines, but those sorts of things have been particularly challenging for startups. And there have been other ways to look at dealing with that, and I can talk about some of those later. But so it has been challenging, and of course, social distancing. We've had to introduce new measures and so on. And if you're a medical company looking to go into a clinical trial, as we were at that stage, everything comes to a standstill, and you can't then go to hospitals and say, look, we want to start a trial on something that's non-COVID related, understandably. So, we had to be nimble. We basically repositioned what we were doing and focused on further developing our technology to add more competitive advantage. We didn't furlough anybody. We managed to find a way that we could carry on development and relocate equipment to people's homes, set up Zoom meetings. In our lab, we limited the number of people who would be there. And all of that, I think, thankfully, to the very strong team we have, and how they were able to work together, that worked for us, and we were able to get through up till now to where we were. We did raise some more money during that period as well, so we kept going. But it's been very challenging, and that's on top of the challenge of being a startup as well. So, yeah.
Just to add to it, absolutely. It seems like you're definitely doing something right, though, Mike. Obviously you've got your way through this situation, this pandemic, and we talk about challenges, but let's not forget, it's really exciting to be part of a startup and be part of something new and that's coming into the industry. So challenges aside, there's also that part of, as I say, being part of something new and exciting, definitely.
Yeah, I think so. And I think when you work in a startup, you've always got to have that optimistic outlook, and any challenge or a bump in the road or a change of direction, it really can present an opportunity, and you have to have the mindset to be able to take advantage of that. Otherwise, you're not going to survive. So you have to have that energy, that mentality. And, I think getting up from challenges and getting through challenges, it definitely makes you stronger, and you feel a real sense of achievement. You're re-energized for the next challenge. And that is a continual process. It's part of the journey.
Yeah, definitely. And, we're in the life science industry, there's always a lot of mergers and acquisitions in this sector. So is the long-term plan or goal, I guess, of a spin-out to always have an exit plan, in your opinion?
Well, I guess it depends what you mean by an exit plan. So an exit plan can mean many, many different things. But I guess the way I would sum it up is the exit is really about driving value for the company. It's about driving value for the people who've invested in you. So your investors, your stakeholders, your academic founders, and the whole team. So that exit can take on a number of forms. Of course, as you hit your milestones, and in our case, as we get into humans and have success and show that our technology is working and better than anything else, that drives value and it attracts the attention of potential acquirers. I mean, we've been very fortunate, even at this stage, we have been noticed by 4 of the major players in the industry, the competitors, because they know what we're up to. They're trying to find out exactly what we're doing. We keep friendly. They ask us to meet for coffee and, on Zoom meetings and things now. We always entertain that, but, we keep a friendly relationship, and we continue to drive the value. So, at some stage, it's highly likely that 1 or 2 will make a pitch for us. And then it's the question of, well, actually, is that the right time? Because that may be early, and our value could be 5 to 10 times higher than at that stage. And we wouldn't want to exit at a low value. And then, there are other options. There are options of, well, actually, do you go down the road of a joint venture, licensing agreement, a distribution agreement, or actually, do you go public? And I've worked with companies that have done all of those different things, and it depends on so many factors, and the environment. And who would have known last year what this year's environment looks like?
Exactly.
And then that's looking at it from just that perspective. You look at it from the geopolitical perspective. China is on the rise. We've got Brexit. We've got what's going on in the US. So how markets look now and how they may look in 2 or 3 years from now, actually, I think it's very hard to predict. And you have to be open-minded about it and be prepared to work so that you're open to take advantage of whatever situation presents itself, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, who would have predicted that we would have been where we are right now? You mentioned Brexit. It's the first time I've heard that for a very long time, actually, because we've been literally overrun with Corona. So for Brexit to come back up in the conversation, it's, as I say, it's something I haven't heard for a little while. But you're right, there's so many elements and different things to factor in, isn't there? So
it's still looming. still
It
live.
is, yeah, an ever-changing market at the moment, definitely. And we've touched a bit about fundraising. Well, you know, fundraising seems to be the key thing in the spin out. So let's talk a little bit more about that side of things, as I know that you've been successful in securing several millions for Oxford Endovascular so far. So how challenging is it to get financial support for an implantable medical device, especially as we've been saying, in the current climate, because you mentioned that it's been getting a bit more challenging in terms of the global pandemic.
Yeah, so implantable medical devices are obviously have high risk
Mm,
associated, and the real inflection point is proving that you can get into the humans and a first in human study and prove that it's safe. And then you go on to a larger study and you show its effectiveness and so on. So to get to that stage, there's quite a lot of development
mm,
that you need to go through. There are very stringent regulations for the right reasons. So before you get to the human, you've got to show that it's safe in other ways. Now, all of that, it costs a lot of money. So the journey from, I guess, spin out to getting it into the Europe market, the US
mm,
market, you're talking about 20, 30 million pounds or
yeah,
more on that journey. And if you look at the development that's taken place, it's 10 to 15 years that have gone on, well before that, going back to the
yeah,
university stage. So I think in order to fundraise, you have to have, yes, a great technology, but you have to have a great team. And it's the team that will take the technology. So you could have a fantastic technology and an average team, and you won't be able to fundraise. You can have an
okay,
average technology and a fantastic team. I think you've probably got a greater chance. If you've got
interesting.
both together, then you're in a really good position. So I think when we were spinning out, yeah, we knew we had a great technology concept. We knew we had to develop it further, but we had to build a fantastic team around that. So that comes back to what you were saying, the importance of hiring and building a team.
Mm,
But then, of course, you've got to have a plan for fundraising. So
yeah,
you can't just cast the net wide and go after 200 investors. You've got to be very targeted about it. So
okay,
taking the time to do your research, like any research project, to identify the investors, and
mm,
they could be VCs, they could be family offices, they could be high net worth individuals. We've talked about various sources of grant funding that are out there. So you've got to do your research
mm,
and look at what is potentially available for your particular market, for your particular type of product or technology. Now, for example, if you decide, okay, the VC route is a good route because you need lots of money, VCs typically will have more money than individuals or pure grant funding. You then have to look at their cycle as an investor. Have they just raised a big fund? Are they looking to invest now? That's a great time. Someone who's got a big fund, but they're coming to the end of that cycle, it's probably not the best time. But
mm,
it's always a good time to build relationships. But I would say target the right people, do the research, there are some very good websites that can help you to identify investors. Networking meetings, so building your network,
mm,
very, very important. And I think actually now, through the COVID situation, it's actually possible to reach a wider group of people
yeah,
from sitting at your home desk. So I've been at 3 international meetings, presented. I've been on panels during this whole period that otherwise I may have struggled to actually get to. So I've done one day. I did 3, whereas I may have only done that one in 1 week if I had to
yeah,
travel across Europe to do that, or to the US. So there have been some opportunities that have come with the technology and people's willingness to do this. And then, of course, grant funding. There are some wonderful grants that are available. Very few companies out of all the people who apply actually, do get them. So you again have to do your research. You have to plan.
mm,
You have to put the time in to write a really good application. But then you have to go through various stages. So just to give you an example, Horizon 2020 is one of the grants that we've won. It was about 3 million euros, and it was a 4-stage process. So your initial application has to be strongly written. It's then assessed. You then have to deal with the questions that come back and answer those. And then you have to go through a period of due diligence. So they look at all your documentation. So you have to be ready for that, have everything in good order. And then if you're fortunate to be called for interview, it's in our case, it was a panel of 15 who were judging us. You had 30 minutes, you had a pitch for 15. You could take along a couple of your team members, so you've got to pick the right team to be successful, and you've got to know when to answer which question and field those carefully. And people are firing things at you, so you've really got to try and anticipate the type of questions that will come up. Talking to other people who've gone through that is very helpful, very important. And then, of course, if you are fortunate enough to win something, actually tracking the grant is a job in itself. So tracking, monitoring it, submitting your financial documents, keeping track of all of that is a job in itself. So there's a lot that goes into it.
There is a lot.
It is, yeah, absolutely. We've raised total of about £8 million so far, and nearly half of that has been through grant funding.
Wow, fantastic. I mean, there's obviously a few options, as you've spoke about, in terms of investors, the investment landscape, grants and different things. So in your experience, would you advise our listeners to focus on one or several, or kind of a collective of all of the above, really, to try and achieve what they're trying to achieve?
Yeah, I think it's a mix of those things, and it's getting all of those things in balance. Now, depends on the type of company you have. I know some really good technology companies that are, maybe don't need the same amount of money that a medical device would do, and they can go quite a long way purely on grant funding before they then need that injection from maybe a VC. In our situation, if you go back to the beginning, we started off with a Wellcome Trust grant that got us going. Then we brought in some individuals, some high net worth individuals who believed in what we were doing, and that then encouraged VCs to come in as well. Our VCs have followed, so all of our investors have carried on funding as we've hit the milestone. So we've been fortunate there. But then winning some grants which are non-dilutive. Of course, investors love that because you're increasing the value, you're making more progress, but it's costing them less, basically. So at the end of the day, they're going to get back a greater rate of return if you can do that. So if you can win that, you keep people happy, and also it has other benefits. It helps to profile you in the wider community. If you win grants, you get a lot of really good publicity beyond your immediate environment. So,
yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned a couple of times there that Oxford Endovascular have been successful in winning the Horizon 2020 grant, and I think that was back in 2019. It's a fantastic program, so congratulations on that in the first instance. I mean, you spoke a bit about the journey, but is it quite a small pool? Are you up against quite a lot of other organisations to win a grant like that, or is it quite competitive?
To give you some numbers, Horizon 2020 has several thousand applicants, and less than 3% will actually.
Wow.
So. And again, other grants as well. I mean, there's a very good Innovate UK program that has a variety of different grants, and we've had some recent news that we've been successful with one of those, which is great. So that's excellent. A UK government-funded grant. But through the COVID crisis, there was a European fund, the EIT Health Rescue Fund, to help companies that maybe couldn't close their funding rounds that they were working on. And that was a European Commission funded project. Now, I think there were over 300 applicants who qualified for that. We were one of them, but only 11 won them, and 2 of them were from the UK. We were one of the 2. So that gives you some idea of how it funnels down.
Definitely. There's going to be a lot of companies out there trying to snap you up now, Mike, off the back of this, thinking how successful you've been in winning and securing the funding for the organisation. Definitely.
Well, I think one of the benefits of attending networking events is that you can meet other people, and you
Mm.
can, people are usually pretty open to share their stories. And if I ever meet people at some of these events, I'm always happy to give some advice, but then I'm also going to learn from them as well. If you
Yeah,
give
exactly.
advice to someone, there's always something you can learn from them as well about something they do and something you may not be aware of. So it always works both ways, I've found. Yeah.
It does, definitely. And, we talk about this new normal, with the corona. I don't like the new normal personally. I think most people don't. But if this is going to be the new normal, what do you think this means for the future of spin outs, Mike?
Well, it's definitely more challenging in
Mm.
ways that people would never have envisaged. Having said that, I think there's certainly a greater emphasis on the importance of healthcare and the
Yes.
need to fund healthcare. I think during the election last year, it was a focus, but some didn't really want to talk about it. But I think it's really brought it home that
Mm.
we all depend on healthcare. We all depend on the doctors and nurses and other staff members in our NHS.
Yeah.
And, whether it's through a crisis like this or another crisis that will come at some stage in the future. There are future pandemics predicted and other things. So investing in healthcare, we invest in ourselves, we invest in our country, we invest in the world, and we invest in our children. And I think, for companies that are now aligning themselves around the healthcare environment, it's a very optimistic future. The infrastructure is needed to be built that I think was lost in the UK. So, for example, we develop prototypes, but we have to use original equipment manufacturers that are not in the UK to do that. The expertise does not exist in the
Mm.
UK. So there are opportunities to develop that capability in the UK. We are the only UK company developing a medical device to cure brain aneurysms. All
No.
the others are US companies. There are maybe a couple of others in other parts of Europe, but they're mainly US giants. And it's a great opportunity for a company like ours and others to actually develop and fly the flag for
Mm.
Britain.
Yeah.
That's something to be proud of. That's something to be patriotic about. And, take the technology and save millions of lives around the world. That's, something we can all benefit from. So I
Yeah.
think there are some great opportunities, and for ancillary industries and industries who would work on things like Zoom and so on. These sorts of platforms
Yeah.
opened up new possibilities. So whilst there have been challenges, and particularly for the travel industry, I think there are other doors that are opening up, and hopefully we'll get through with a vaccine, and then the travel industry will open up as well, and we can get back to another new normal and meeting in the way,
Yeah.
because we're all social animals at the end of the day.
Absolutely, and I think that's what we've all been, struggling with a lot more than anything else. And you are right. Yes, there's negatives that we can take out of this whole situation because that's all we hear all the time, especially in the first few months. But the positives are, as you say, it opens up new, different opportunities and different things that and different products and services that companies can offer off the back of this. Because obviously, one door closes, another opens, as they say, really. So I think that's the opportunity that people need to look out for more than anything else. And now we spoke a little bit about having the right talent on board. You mentioned earlier, it's critical for any company really, let alone a spin out. But what would you advise to a founder of a spin out regarding talent and hiring for their team, especially in the early days, Mike?
So again, I think it comes down to good planning, thinking about what your needs are as a company. So of course you've got to map that out strategically and
Mm.
financially, but then at the end of the day, it's people who make it happen.
Yep.
People come up with the ideas, people come up with the intellectual property, people put the plans into action. So for a startup, for a spin out, you have to have people who believe in a cause, believe in and are passionate to take something through a very challenging journey but want to see it successful. So you really want to be able to build a team who are going to be with you for the long term. You want to build a team that has diversity in it with complementary skills. So you want people who are different, but can come together and work as a team. So you need someone, yes, who's very action orientated. You need people who have lots of ideas. You need people who are good at crunching the numbers. Now, some of those may be in your immediate team that you build. But of course, when you're a startup, you will reach out and use networks of different sorts of people, consultants and other organizations that become part of your wider team. So it's your immediate team, your core team. It's thinking about the wider team and network that you need to work with. And when you're hiring people, it's very important to have a very robust hiring process that's fair. Take the time to identify the right people. Make sure you've identified the skill sets for the role. You have a very well thought through job description. One of the things we try and do is involve all the members of our team actually in feeding into that and the process, so that when we finally find a short list of people, they're all going to be people that they can work with. They're all they've had a part in helping to bring them on board and onboard them, because then that they're going to be able to work together for the longer term and support each other. And we have people in our team, if somebody can't do something because they're overloaded or they're off sick or something, someone else will always step in and pick that up for them. And that's a great position.
Yeah.
Maybe that's because we're a small team, we're able to do that. But if we can sustain that as we grow, that's great. But then there are other teams as well. So, your board, you have to have a strong, supportive board. So again, picking the right people to be on the board. Of course, some of those are your investors. So again, you've got to work very closely with them, build your relationship. Some are academics. Okay, so, build the relationship with them, have a good chair, have good NEDs in place, have a good finance person who is there. Plan those board meetings really well and prepare for them really well. Engage with people before so there aren't any surprises. Be transparent, be open. And, I think one of the things we found is that as long as you're very open with your board about what you're going through and you're coming up with solutions, you're bringing solutions to the board, generally people are going to be, very, very supportive. So, but you've got to put a lot of work into that 2-hour board meeting or whatever it is that you have. There's probably days or weeks that go into making that a successful meeting.
Absolutely.
So that's the wider team as well. So it's hiring, it's all of these things as well. So.
Yeah, and that all makes sense, and also critical, as you say, especially in a smaller organisation, because there's so many people that are involved in everything, especially the board. And as you say, it's like keeping things transparent and open, so there's no surprises. And I think more importantly, a key tip there was, of not having any surprises really, and going in with the solution. Ultimately people never want to hear about problems, but if you rock up with a problem but you have a potential solution, then that's always a better end to a conversation, rather than we have this problem, how do we get out of it? So
and that's the key thing, and I think that goes throughout teams, and it's something that I encourage our team, when we have our management meeting, come to the meeting, highlight any issues and challenges, but always have some solutions. And people do, they always people have good ways around the challenges, and they explain the implications, the costs, and so on. So it's a very, I guess, open environment that we've tried to to cultivate and make people feel safe that they can bring challenges up, because otherwise you'll think you're going in the right direction, and you'll inevitably get a nasty surprise because people are just trying to please you. So it's finding that balance between all of those things, and that takes time.
It does. Time and experience, I think, Mike, definitely. So before we wrap up on the podcast subject today, if you were to think of any sort of top tips to summarize on this subject before we finish up, what would they be, Mike?
Well, some ones
Fundraising,
we,
fundraising, fundraising.
well, that's kind of a given now, I think. But
Yeah.
a great mentor of mine many years ago, when I was probably fresh out of university, gave me some very good advice. And they said, the ingredient that you need to be successful is the hide of a rhinoceros. So I think what he was really saying is that you've got to be resilient.
Yeah.
You don't know what's coming at you. The environment can change, and you have to be able to take it on the chin, work through it, navigate through, learn from it, become stronger. So, I think building that over time, I think somebody once said the test of a true champion is getting up from defeat. And you will have defeats and you will get knocked down, but if you can get back up, you'll be ever more stronger and more experienced before it and ready for any next challenge. And that's the key thing. So I would say, keep focused, plan well, build and use your network, help other people, because you never know when you need someone else's help. It's usually quite often.
Yeah.
Come back and help you. So you create a community of support around yourself, people who believe in you, people who are willing to go the extra mile for you, and help others as well. So I would encourage people to do that. And I think if we've learned anything through this whole pandemic is the spirit of trying to help other people, because you never know what situation you may find yourself in as a company or as an individual. So
absolutely. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there, Mike. The human kindness and the humanity side of things really came out when we went into lockdown. I certainly felt that even from a personal level as well as in business, definitely. Yeah. But I think, you're quite right what you said there. Perseverance, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger, right? As they say. And you've got to go, you've got to go through ups and downs to learn and grow, I think, more than anything else, especially in a startup organization.
And and in a startup, if you can encourage your team to have that and they develop that, then as an organization, you develop that sort of undying spirit. And you need that to get through all these challenges. Yeah.
Absolutely. Brilliant. So we do need to wrap up here, even though we could go on talking about this all day. But I'd really like to thank you, Mike, once again for joining me today and sharing your thoughts with me and the audience. I'm sure they will find it absolutely invaluable. And of course, if anyone does want to reach out to Mike, even for an informal chat, I'm sure that, Mike, you would be happy to speak to someone, or as you've been saying, obviously, spreading the love and sharing your network. So we will put your branding obviously on here so that people do know how to reach out to you, if that's okay with you, Mike.
Yeah, I'd be delighted to help anyone who approaches us. And as I say, we always learn something. So it's been a real pleasure to speak with you, Claire. And thank you for the very pertinent questions, and it's made me think a lot about the way we do things as well. So thank you for that.
Excellent. You're very welcome, Mike, and thank you once again. And so that's it for today's podcast. Join me again for the next episode in the series, where I will have another guest on to talk about more relevant topics. We hope that you found this beneficial, helpful, and insightful, and look forward to next time. So thank you very much. Thanks, Mike.
Take care. Bye. Get a chance to meet up properly sometime.
Yeah, let's hope so, Mike. And if we don't, I wish you all the best for your continued success with this. It sounds like a fantastic company and what you're trying to do.
Thank you. All right.
You're very welcome. Have a great evening.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.